I need to tell you something.
What is it?
It's about us.
Tell me.
The first thing Park Jae-won said when he came home that Tuesday was not hello. He set his keys on the counter with the particular deliberateness of someone who had rehearsed the next 5 minutes and was committed to the choreography. Nadia Mensa Park looked up from the manuscript she was editing at the kitchen table. 3 years of marriage had made her fluent in the dialects of his silences, and this one had a shape she did not recognize and did not like. "I need to tell you something," he said. She closed the manuscript. She had met Jae-won at a conference in London, where she had been presenting a paper on post-colonial publishing frameworks, and he had been attending for reasons that had never become entirely clear to her. He was charming in the specific way of men who've decided charm is the most efficient tool. She had been 26 and working at a small literary press in Hackney, and he had called her brilliant in a way that felt, at the time, like being seen. They married 14 months later. She moved to Seoul. She learned Korean with the focused discipline she brought to everything. She found work at an international publishing house in Mapo and built a life in a city that was not hers, and she was good at it. The building, the staying, the daily work of becoming fluent in someone else's world. She did not know until Tuesday how much of that work had been done alone. "I've been seeing someone," Jae-won said. He was still standing. He had not taken off his coat. "I want a divorce. She's pregnant." The kitchen was quiet in the way of rooms where something structural has just failed. Not loud, not dramatic, simply the sound of weight redistributing. 8 months, she said. "I know this is 8 months." Her voice was steady. She had a voice that stayed steady because she had learned very early that steadiness was the thing no one could take from you. "Our anniversary was 6 months ago. You gave a speech." Something moved across his face. Not guilt. Guilt would have required him to have been fighting it. Something closer to discomfort at the inconvenience of the timeline. "I know what I said." "Jae-won." She looked at him with the full, clear attention of someone who is seeing something precisely as it is for the first time, without the overlay of who they had hoped it was. "Look at me." He looked briefly and then looked at the counter. That was the answer. She stood up. She took her manuscript. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door. Not because she was managing herself. She was doing it desperately, but because she refused to come apart in front of someone who had made his choice 8 months ago and simply had not bothered to tell her. She sat on the edge of the bed in the apartment she had made into a home with the considered attention of someone who takes that work seriously. The Ghanaian wax print cushions she had sourced from Itaewon, the shelf of Korean and English books organized by the conversation they had with each other, the small succulent her mother had sent from Accra on their first anniversary, and she pressed her hands flat on her thighs and breathed. Her phone showed 4 missed calls from an unknown number, then a text from a number she didn't have saved. "It's Park Hyun-soo, Jae-won's brother. I'm outside. I know this is strange. I know what's happening tonight. I thought you shouldn't be alone after. I can leave if you want." She looked at the text for a long time. Then she typed, "How did you know?" His reply came in under a minute. "He told our mother last week. I've been trying to figure out how to warn you since then. I didn't find a good way." She looked at the succulent on the windowsill, at the wax print cushions, at the life she had assembled with care in a city not her own. "Give me 20 minutes, she typed. Park Hyun-soo was 32, 4 years older than Jae-won, a structural engineer who worked for a firm in Yongsan and had, in the 3 years of her marriage to his brother, been consistently present in the particular way of someone who shows up without making a production of it. He had helped her move furniture when they first arrived. He had texted her, unprompted, the name of the best Korean tutor in Mapo. When her mother visited from Accra, he had taken them both to Bukchon without being asked and had answered her mother's questions about Seoul with the patient specificity of someone who genuinely liked answering questions. She always knew he was good. She had not, until now, understood what that had cost him to watch, to know the shape of what her brother was, and to be unable to say it to her. He was sitting on the front step when she came out. He stood immediately. He was tall, broader than Jaewon, with the same jaw but something different in the eyes. Where Jaewon's gaze moved across people looking for their utility, Hyun-soo's simply landed and stayed. He looked at her face and did not say, "Are you okay?" which was the right call. "There's a 24-hour cafe 2 blocks over. They have good tea. We don't have to talk. I just didn't want you to be by yourself in there." She looked at him. "You've been sitting outside?" 40 minutes, he said. "I brought a book." She almost laughed. It came out wrong, too close to something else, and she pressed her lips together. He waited, without filling the silence, and that was also the right call. "Okay, tea." She did not talk about Jaewon. They sat in the window of the cafe with their tea, and she asked about the project he was working on, a pedestrian bridge in Incheon, and he described the structural problem they'd been solving for 6 weeks with the focused attention of someone who finds the work genuinely interesting and has forgotten, momentarily, to perform modesty about it. She asked 2 follow-up questions. He looked briefly surprised, and then answered them seriously. She had a master's degree in literature and an instinct for the architecture of things, arguments, narratives, the way a structure bore its own weight or didn't. She understood the bridge problem by the 3rd question.
"You should move the load-bearing point," she said, "toward the natural anchor of the riverbank. The problem isn't the span, it's where you've centered the tension." He went very still. "Say that again?" She said it again, differently, with her hands. He looked at her with an expression she filed away without examining directly. Yes, that's the answer. I've been looking at this for 3 weeks. He picked up a pen from his jacket, and she pushed her napkin toward him without being asked, and he sketched it out, and they bent over the napkin together for 20 minutes while the cafe moved around them. At the end, he sat back and looked at the napkin, and then at her. "Nadia," he said, "that's exactly right. Structural logic," she said, with the steadiness that was the thing no one could take from her. "It's the same as an argument. Put the weight where there's something solid to hold it." He looked at her for a moment with something careful in his expression. Then he looked at his tea. "I'm sorry about tonight, about Jaewon, about all of it." "You didn't do it," she said. "No," he said, "but I knew the kind of person he was before you married him. I told myself it wasn't my place." He was quiet. "I've thought about that a lot, whether that was right." "It wasn't your fault," she said. "No," he said, "but it also wasn't entirely not." She looked at him, the honesty of it, without self-pity, just the clear-eyed reckoning of someone who held themselves accountable to standards they had actually examined. It was the 2nd time in one evening she had seen something precisely as it was. This time it did not hurt. "Thank you for sitting outside," she said. "I'll do it again if you need." He paused. "I mean that generically, I'm not asking for anything from this, I want to be clear." "I know," she said. And she did. The divorce took 5 months. Jaewon was mostly absent from the process in the specific way of people who want the outcome without the friction of the passage. His mother called Nadia twice, the first time to apologize, with a sincerity that was real and limited. The second time to ask with a delicacy that was also real and also limited, whether Nadia was managing. "I'm managing," Nadia said both times. She was. Barely, and then better, and then well, in the incremental way of grief that is also the grief of a life that was less than it appeared. She stayed in Seoul. She had built something here, and she was not prepared to unmake it simply because Jaewon had proven not worth the making. She moved to a small apartment in Mangwon near the river and bought a new succulent for the windowsill and organized the books by the conversation they had with each other, which was how she had always done it, and that was something. Hyun-soo texted occasionally, not often, once to send the address of a bookshop in Hongdae that specialized in African literature in translation, once to ask whether the structural note she had made on the napkin could be applied to a second problem he was working through, and they had texted back and forth for an hour, with her diagramming on a notebook page she photographed and sent to him, and at the end he said, "You think in load paths," which was the most precise description of her mind anyone had offered. Once, during a week she had said nothing indicated was difficult, he sent a message that said only, "Nadia, how are you doing? Not managing, actually." She sat with that text for a while. Then she called him, because it was easier to speak than to find the words for the page. "I miss my mother," she said when he picked up. "I miss Accra. I miss the light in the afternoon. Tell me," he said. He had a gift for that two-word request that made space without filling it. So she told him the specific quality of late afternoon in Accra, the way the light came through the garden behind her mother's house in October, gold through the mango trees, and the sound of her mother's voice calling them in for dinner, and the feeling of being somewhere that knew her name. He listened. You could hear it, the quality of his listening, which was active and real, not the performance of waiting for his turn. "In Gangju," he said, when she was finished, "there's a light like that in autumn. Not the same, but it has the same quality of being saturated, like the day has decided to mean something." He paused. "I'll take you there, if you want, some autumn." "Some autumn," she said. "No pressure on the timing," he said. "I'm in no hurry." She registered this without examining it and went to bed, and woke the next morning to find that something had shifted almost without permission. The grief a few grams lighter, the apartment a few degrees warmer, the window showing the Mangwon street in the early light and the river past the buildings, and Seoul doing what it always did, which was continue, which was itself a kind of argument. He brought her a book in March. Not sent, but brought. He knocked on her apartment door on a Saturday morning and handed it directly, a study of West African architectural traditions in conversation with East Asian construction philosophy, academic and dense, and completely specific to the intersection of her work and his. He had written in the margins in the blue-black ink he always used, 3 bracketed notes and a question mark on page 47. "The question mark on 47, she said. "The author is wrong," he said, "but not in the way you think. Look at the footnote." He leaned in. Their shoulders were very close. He read the footnote. He went quiet for a moment. "Ah," he said. "Yes," she said. "The argument is actually stronger than he realizes, which is its own kind of problem." He looked at her with the full quality of his attention, which was the same as it had been in the cafe on the worst night of her recent history, landed, present, not going anywhere. "You're right, that's a better critique than mine." "Yes," she said, and let him in. They were in her apartment for 3 hours, the book between them on the kitchen table. And then they went to the river, because it was March, and the cold was relenting, and the Han in late winter light is an argument for staying in a city you chose. They walked without having agreed to walk, which meant they both just started walking, which was information. At the railing, she said, "Why did you sit outside that night? Really? He looked at the river. Because I should have done something earlier and couldn't, because sitting outside was the smallest version of doing something. That's the honest reason? It's one of them, he said. She turned to look at him. He was still watching the water, and something in the set of his jaw told her the rest of it was sitting right behind his teeth, held there by the discipline of a man who had decided a long time ago that his feelings were not her problem to manage. Hyunsu, she said, say the other one. He was quiet for a long moment. The river moved. A couple passed behind them, laughing at something, their voices fading into the city. Then he turned to face her, and the expression on his face was one she had never seen on him, not the steady, contained version of himself he brought to everything, but something underneath that, unguarded and serious and slightly desperate, the face of a man who has been holding something at arm's length for a very long time and has run out of arm. I've been in love with you since the first night Jaewon brought you home to meet us. The river kept going. 3 years ago? She said. 3 years ago, he said. You were wearing a yellow dress, and you argued with my uncle about post-colonial trade economics for 40 minutes, and you were completely right, and you knew it, and you didn't soften it to make him comfortable. He looked at her directly, the way he always looked at things he took seriously. I thought, that is a person who knows the exact weight of what she's carrying and has decided it's worth it, and I couldn't stop looking at you the entire evening. Nadia was very still. And then, he was yours, Hyunsi said. So I put it somewhere and I left it there, and I told myself that was the right thing, that it was enough to be around you, to be your brother-in-law who sent the tutor's name and helped with the furniture. He paused. I got good at enough. Hyunsu, he said. I'm not finished, he said, not unkindly. I need to finish. She closed her mouth. I've had 3 years of knowing exactly what you're like, the way your mind moves, the way you go still when you're reading something that matters, the way you don't soften things, but you're never unkind. And I have spent more nights than I will tell you, lying awake thinking about what it would feel like to hold you, to kiss you. His voice stayed level, but it was costing him. What it would feel like to be the one you came home to. The city behind them was doing its evening thing, indifferent and full of light. And then he did what he did, Hyunsi said, and I felt I was furious at him because I know what he had. I know exactly what he had, and I watched him not see it for 3 years and then throw it away for... He stopped, steadied himself. I cannot fathom it. I have tried. I cannot fathom how you look at what you had and decide it isn't enough. Nadia looked at the water because she needed somewhere to put her eyes. I sat outside that night because I could not let you be alone in there. That's the real reason, not principle, not decency, because the idea of you sitting in that apartment by yourself after what he'd said was... He shook his head. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay home. He turned toward her fully then, and she made herself look at him because he had earned that much. I know the timing is terrible. I know what you just came through. I know I am the wrong shape of the wrong family, arriving at the wrong moment. I know all of that. I took a breath. I'm asking anyway, because I think I would regret not asking for the rest of my life, and I've had enough of swallowing things. I want to take care of you, not because you need it, you don't, you're the most capable person I know, but because I want to be the one who gets to. I want to show you every day what it looks like when someone sees you and doesn't look away. His voice dropped, certain and quiet. Give me a chance, Nadia. Please. The please landed with all the weight of a man who does not say it easily.
She looked at him. The Han behind him, the city above him, the last of the afternoon gold going amber on the water. She looked at the face of someone who had been present, quietly and without agenda, through the worst stretch of her recent life, who had sat on a cold step for 40 minutes with a book, who had listened to her describe Accra at 4 o'clock and had not filled the silence with comfort, but with something better, with actual understanding. She thought about Jaewon, about what it felt like to be in the same room as someone who was looking through you rather than at you. She thought about the 3 years she had spent learning a city and a language and a life while standing next to someone who had already decided she was furniture. She looked at Hyun-soo, who had memorized things she'd said once in passing, who thought in load paths, who had spent 3 years loving her from the correct and disciplined distance. She hesitated, not because she didn't know. She had known for longer than she was prepared to admit. She hesitated because the last time she had moved toward something, it had cost her considerably, and her body remembered that cost, even when her mind had moved past it. He watched her hesitate and did not push. That, too, was information. She tilted her head and looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Not the careful, managed version, not the steadiness she used as armor. Something warmer than that. Something that had apparently finished waiting. "You've spent 3 years," she said slowly, "thinking about what it would feel like." "Yes," he said. "To hold me," she said. "To kiss me." His jaw tightened slightly. "Yes." She looked at him for one more long moment, the Han behind them, the city doing its indifferent golden thing, the whole complicated geometry of how they had arrived here, on this particular bridge, at this particular hour. "You want to know what it feels like." "Nadia." The corner of her mouth moved, warm and certain and entirely deliberate. "Well," she said quietly, "today's your lucky day." She closed the distance between them and kissed him. Not tentative, not exploratory, the full, decided kind, her hand coming up to his jaw, her black braids falling forward, the weight of 3 years and 1 terrible October and 5 months of napkin diagrams and margin notes, and a man sitting on a cold step for 40 minutes without being asked, landing in one completely unambiguous moment. He made a sound, low and quiet, that was the sound of something finally, after a very long time, being allowed. His arms came around her, steady and certain, the same way he did everything that mattered to him, and he kissed her back with 3 years of being careful in it, and not an ounce of it left. When she pulled back, she was looking at him from very close. His eyes were closed. He opened them slowly. The expression on his face was something she had not seen before, the full, unmanaged version of Hyun-soo, without the discipline, warm and wrecked and quietly amazed. "Well," he said. His voice was different. "Yes." She laughed, the real one, the full one, the one that came from somewhere deep and unheld. It surprised her and did not surprise her at all. "Today was your lucky day." "Every day I've known you has been my lucky day," he said simply, and meant it so completely there was nowhere for it to go except directly into her chest. She shook her head, but she was still smiling, and she turned back toward the river, and he stayed beside her, and she did not move away when his shoulder found hers. The Han went on. The city arranged itself in the evening the way it always did, dense and lit, and full of lives being lived in the ordinary, extraordinary way of lives. Somewhere across the water, the lights were coming on, one by one. "Gyeongju," she said, after a while. "This autumn," he said. "And Accra, my mother's garden, the 4 o'clock light."
He turned to look at her profile in the evening gold. "Tell me when," he said. "Soon," she said, and then, "She's going to love you." He stayed quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she's right too." Nadia looked at the water. The warmth moving through her was not the careful, rationed kind she had learned to keep on a short lead. It was the other kind, the kind that knows its own weight and has decided it's worth it. Some things make their way to the right person by the long route. Some loves wait with the patience of someone who has decided the waiting is worth it. And then one evening on a bridge above the Han, they stop waiting. This was all of those things, and Accra was coming, and so, finally, was everything.